Hello and welcome to The Wire. Former Deputy Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Padma Bhushan awardee, as well as the chief patron of People's Democratic Party, Muzaffar Hussain Beg, has been raising eyebrows in Kashmir Valley as the new face of new political beginning in Kashmir Valley. How true are the speculations? To try and find out, I have with me PDP's chief patron, Muzaffar Hussain Beg. Beg Saab, welcome to The Wire.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Beg Saab, is it true what is being said? Are you the New Delhi's man in Kashmir?
Well, every Indian is somehow connected with New Delhi. So New Delhi represents the central government in parliament. But if you mean that I have been commissioned to do a job by the central government, no.
Now there are some murmurs going on that firstly it was thought that Syed Altaf Bukhari was going to be the new face of political beginning in Kashmir Valley after the scrapping of Article 370. Now the eyes are on you. After you receive that Padma Bhushan, the eyes are on you. So are you going to be the new face of the political beginning in Kashmir?
I don't want to comment on Altaf Bukhari at all in this matter. He is a colleague. He was expelled from the party without consulting me. I wish him well. But I don't think that Padma Bhushan has got anything to do with the future of Jammu Kashmir. It's not given to my person. I don't take it personally. I think this award was for the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
But from fighting the slain Maqbool Bhatt's clemency case to now receiving Padma Bhushan, the third highest civilian honor, has what Beg Saab stood for changed over time?
First of all, let me correct you. That case was contested by Kapil Sibal in Supreme Court. However, we had a law firm in Srinagar, and Amnesty International had written a letter to provide legal help. Amnesty International does it all over the world. I contacted Mr. Kapil Sibal and he was kind enough to present the case in the Supreme Court.
You are a tremendous lawyer and you've represented many business houses. So is there a reason why you have not approached a court of law regarding the incarceration of PDP President Mehbooba Mufti under PSA? Or is someone in the party already handling it?
There was a very startling development. A friend of Farooq Abdullah went to Supreme Court challenging his arrest under Section 107 of CRPC. Normally, even a Naib Tahsildar can release you on that. When he went to Supreme Court, what happened? Public Safety Act was applied to Farooq Abdullah. So the situation went from bad to worse. I was myself under the house arrest. The question of my approaching the Supreme Court at that stage did arise. After I had a health problem, the house arrest was partially lifted and then fully lifted. So, the question of knocking at the door of any court became a very doubtful, double-edged sword. After Farooq Abdullah was petitioned in Supreme Court, after that petition, instead of keeping him under 107, where he could be released any time, he has been put under Public Safety Act. It would not have been wise. Secondly, unless I have an access and get a power of attorney from the people who are inside the jail, how can I go to court?
Before this scrapping of Article 370, you had advocated till the last moment that Government of India or Parliament does not have the power to scrap Jammu and Kashmir's special status until unless they had the consent of Jammu and Kashmir's Constituent Assembly, which had already been done away with, or until a state representative body was in place or they had the consent from it. You had mentioned this in the Gupkar Declaration as well. What is your stand on it now? Do you still believe that the scrapping of Article 370 was unconstitutional and illegal?
I had the privilege of appearing for the largest business house once in Supreme Court. And I argued a case which became a law that once a matter is before any court, particularly Supreme Court, any comment by anyone mobilizing public opinion in favor or against constitutes a contempt of the court. So, these days, it has become fashionable for people to comment on what will happen, Mandir case, what will happen in Triple Talaq, what will happen in this case or that case. I'm bound by the law of the Supreme Court since I know the law, and I was responsible for arguing that case in which the law was laid down. I don't want to comment now on the merits of the case. Of course, I would hope that the Supreme Court will do what is just and proper according to law.
But do you believe that the people of Kashmir have suddenly forgotten their demand for azadi or even autonomy and will now be okay with statehood?
Only God knows. People of Kashmir are not the only people involved here. People of Jammu are equally involved. So far as Kashmir is concerned, there is a deafening silence. In the first interview to a magazine, I said, I don't know whether it is a lull before the storm or whether it's a reconciliation with altered realities. I still don't know what the people of Kashmir are going to do in future.
But you have now been advocating land rights, education rights, and it's like you are trying to bring a new discourse to Jammu and Kashmir politics.
It's one rider. In case the judgment of the Supreme Court upholds the decision of the central government vis-a-vis Article 370 in 35A, and also upholds the validity of the legislation which downgraded state of Jammu and Kashmir from statehood to a union territory. In case the judgment is in favor of those decisions, then what is it that is left for the ethnic communities of Jammu and Kashmir? I am not talking only for Kashmiris or Muslims. I am talking as an ordinary citizen on behalf of all the ethnic and linguistic identity of Dogras, Gujars, Bakarwals, Pahadis, Kashmiris, Muslims, Kashmiri Pandits. And I have said that in the event the judgment goes against, in favor of the central government and the Parliament of India, then we should, in a civilized and responsible manner, try to evolve a consensus across communities and regions and request Government of India that you have treated hill states in Northeast by giving them a special provision under Article 371, which protects their rights over the land, imposes restrictions on sale to people who are not residents of that place, original residents, and also provide reservation, exclusive reservation in jobs to the original residents of Jammu and Kashmir. In this case, in Northeast, it applies to them. And the benefit of that special provision should also be available. That should be our request, our common request, civilized and polite request to Government of India and Parliament of India to consider the ethnic communities of Jammu and Kashmir at par with the ethnic communities of Northeast, and give us the benefit that. This is one. Secondly, I also hope that the statement given by the Prime Minister in a lengthy speech and by the Honorable Home Minister also, by the he followed Honorable, I think, Prime Minister, or one followed the other, I don't remember the sequence, in which they said that as soon as circumstances improve in Jammu and Kashmir, statehood will be restored. In a union territory, all powers are actually vested in the Lieutenant Governor. Even if you hold an election and MLAs are elected and there is a Chief Minister and there is a cabinet, the Act says, the Union Territory Act, which applies to us, says it is for the Lieutenant Governor whether or not to consult the cabinet. So here you will have an exercise of an election and swearing in. You will have ministers, you will have chief ministers who, like Kejriwal, may have to sit out in the lobby of the Lieutenant Governor for 7 days, and nobody gave them any attention. Finally, they had to leave. So Jammu and Kashmir is an ancient state. It's one of the it has a special significance because of its geographical and historical perspective and composition of the various communities which are ethnic. All of them are ethnic. So we would expect that the central government becomes generous enough on our on the basis of consensus that evolves in the state to grant the statehood as soon as possible.
You are the person who wrote that document on self-rule, and now we are here and you are demanding statehood. So has it been that long journey, and how does it feel?
State, I was the author of that document, which was later adopted by our party executive committee, in a particular historical context. That time, the dialogue between Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and President Musharraf was at a very advanced stage. And they had agreed in principle to render the borders irrelevant, like the situation that exists in Europe. There are many countries in Europe, but borders are irrelevant. You only have to show identity card and you can travel here and there. And then they have common industries, common universities. In Europe, you have one parliament. Europe has one Supreme Court. After 2 world wars. So I think that Musharraf had learned his lesson after the Kargil War, which was a misadventure. He had come around to the idea that the best way for serving the people of Pakistan, so far as he is concerned, and serving the people of India, so far as Government of India is concerned, is to follow some sort of model which is identical in separated execution to the experiment which the European Union evolved after 2 world wars, after crores of people were killed. So it was in that context that the self-rule document was prepared by me, because we had to synchronize the new arrangement. The Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir had to synchronize with the Constitution of India, and the agreement that would be reached, hopefully at that time we thought, between India and Pakistan. Situation today is different. Today the issue for the people of Jammu and Kashmir is when will we get this statehood? When shall we ever get the benefit of Article 371 or not? The situation is altered. And the only hope is that there is no support given to militants by Government of Pakistan. I welcome the statement of Imran Khan when he said that any person who gives a gun to any human being and requests him or persuades him or orders him to go to Kashmir, or Jammu and Kashmir, he is an enemy of Jammu and Kashmir. I hope what he said is executed on the ground and militancy stops. Because so long as there is militancy, you may have even a statehood, you may have even an benefit of Article 371. So long as militancy continues, the situation cannot be called normal. Development cannot take place. Tourism cannot take grounds. Health sector is neglected. Education sector is neglected. There are more than 7 lakh, 8 lakh unemployed, educated people. They can't have a bright future or a happy or prosperous future. And there is an agreement between India and Pakistan, Shimla Agreement, which says that you talk to each other. I hope that the Imran Khan, who I believe is a well-meaning human being, is not corrupt as far as I know. I've heard from people. And he was very well loved in India where he was a cricket captain. He was one of the most popular people in India, not only in Pakistan. That he steers his way through a peaceful process and addresses this issue. While we are talking of the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and its peaceful resolution, we are forgetting that we are 84,000 square miles. The original Maharaja's Jammu and Kashmir, 84,000 square miles. 42,000 square miles are with Union of India. 30,000 square miles are with Pakistan. 12,000 square miles are with China. Nobody talks about China. The most strategic from defense point of view and trade point of view, the most strategic piece of land of the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir is in possession with China. So it's not only Pakistan that is, will have to be talked to. I think even a stage may come when, there may be talks between India and China also.
Mr. Beg, you had said in a statement as well that referendum in Jammu and Kashmir is not possible. I would like to understand from you, is invasion of Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir possible?
You see, history teaches us that anything is possible. Insanity is also possible. Jews were burnt alive by Hitler. Who can think so, today, in today's time? But I think that it's possible, but it's not advisable. Both countries are nuclear powers. Somebody has come out with a calculation that if both countries use their full nuclear power, we won't see sun for 100 years. Entire life will disappear in 2 years. So I don't think that, I hope and I pray almost every day, in my own way, I pray that a situation arises where even the talk of using nuclear power anywhere in the world, particularly between India and Pakistan, doesn't arise.
Mr. Beg, don't you think that before engaging with centre and its representatives, it should be a precondition that all the activists and politicians that were incarcerated during August 5, 2019 should be released first?
I am not talking in terms of precondition. I have made a request. In the first interview I gave after, this house arrest was relaxed, I get to a magazine called Kashmir Magazine. In that I gave a very lengthy exposition of my hopes and expectations. I hope that somebody reads it in Delhi also and in Pakistan also. Because the only practical way looking for me, as a citizen of this country and as a resident of this region, the only way forward is by restoring some sense of dignity to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, which they enjoyed, but which they lost because of downgrading the state, and that there is some way forward for a peaceful way of dealing with this issue of the territorial division of the state between three countries. It may take a long time, but I see no other way except a peaceful negotiation.
Beg Sahib, it is also the talk of the town that the era of the Abdullahs is over. But I am reminded that Sheikh Abdullah was arrested for 22 long years,
yes,
and afterwards Government of India had to shake hands with him once again.
Yes.
So what do you think? Is the era of Abdullahs over, or will National Conference be revived again?
You see, this is like, more like an idle speculation. All chief ministers, ever since 1948 or whatever, first they were called prime ministers or chief ministers, except one was from Jammu. All were from Kashmir. In Kashmir, Sheikh Abdullah's family was a dominant family. And it's not surprising that Sheikh Abdullah and then his son came forward. They were the dominant political party. I contested elections against them even at a very young age. I disagreed with certain of their policies. There's one gentleman who from Jammu region, some people may have pointed out to me that he too was he was also a Kashmiri in origin. Ghulam Nabi Azad, a decent gentleman, very pleasant man. But he was also originally from, they pointed it out. I have not asked Mr. Azad whether which part of Kashmir his ancestors came from, if that's true. So, in Jammu, the dominant community are Dogras. And Dogra rule was replaced by so-called popular government. So I don't know how popular any government or each government was. So there was a pent-up sort of grievance, there still may be pent-up sort of grievance, that why should only people from Kashmir have this privilege of being at the top position. And it's a question. It's not just is a question of vanity or pride. So, in a democracy, there are changes from time to time. There are no. In America, of course, the president is fixed for 8 years. You can't have more than 8 years. But in a democracy, you can have 18 years or 20 years or 30 years. So this, my request is to the Government of India, because you said that 3 ex-chief ministers are in prison. I say that it's a very strange situation, a very perplexing, and for me as an individual, it's a painful situation, where people who swore by the Constitution of India, their families face social boycott. They face the threats of militants. Some of their relatives were killed. Their chief ministers or MLAs or MLCs, they have been in prison for 6 months. So I made a request about 3 months back that please release them. If you can't release all of them at once, release them in installments. If somebody commits a crime, you can arrest him again. But why to punish these people? Virtually, it amounts to conviction. It's not a preventive detention, it's a conviction. Like you, without any charge, the constitutionalists, people who believe in Constitution, are there. And I have been requesting that all these people be released, whichever party.
That's why I asked, shouldn't it be a precondition that before there is a new political beginning in Jammu and Kashmir?
No, I don't like to use the word preconditions, this and that. This is a request. Of course, if somebody is accused of corruption, or joining hands with militants, or being a double-faced person, taking Constitution in one hand and helping somebody with gun in the other hand. If you have some evidence, some charge of this nature, corruption or betrayal, then you prosecute them, whosoever he is. But if you have no such allegation or evidence before you, release them. Let them become part of society. Let them come and mix with the people so that we can evolve some sort of consensus. Let's try to make a new beginning for Jammu and Kashmir.
We'll try to talk about People's Democratic Party as well. Some PDP leaders have already rebelled against the party president, Mehbooba Mufti. You, as chief patron of PDP, said that it was Mehbooba Mufti's statements that were responsible for the scrapping of Article 370. So, from these statements.
No, I didn't make that statement. I said that so far as BJP was concerned, as far as I know, in their election agenda, there was scrapping of Article 370 and 35A. Downgrading the state did not exist. Now, when Mehbooba made that statement, I was taken by surprise. I was not even consulted. Normally, when our father was the patron, for every decision, either we needed his prior approval or his post facto, consent. So I was surprised by two things. First, that National Conference and PDP decided not to participate in local self-government elections. I was not only surprised, I was annoyed. Because democracy starts from the grassroots, from the villages, from the towns. First, National Conference said we will not contest, then PDP president said they will not contest. When some people called on me, some workers, I said, she has taken a decision. I think that this decision is not good, but she is a president. I am not going to get into a dispute with president, simply on the basis of being a patron or a senior worker of the PDP. When she made that statement about flag and nobody picking up this, that, etc., I was shocked. Not only because I didn't know that she was going to make such a speech, but because I was surprised that she, being the chief minister of an alliance in which BJP was a partner, the proper course, and perhaps the more effective course, would have been to have a polite conversation with the powers that be in BJP and request them to defer this agenda and try to win the confidence of the people across the regions before taking any such step. Number one. Number two, with the passage of time, there is some change took place about my view about the statement made by her. Not that I agreed with her view, but because I thought that there must have been some mischief monger within the party who enjoyed her confidence. I have one or two people in mind, but I won't name them. I won't name them. Who might have persuaded her to make this statement, and she might have become emotional or got swayed and made this statement. Otherwise, she has been in politics for a long time. She has been a chief minister with BJP. How would she make such a statement, which would prove counterproductive? What was the result? BJP was not in majority, but they could get their bill passed. How? With the help of the opposition. This statement was an affront, taken as an affront, not only by BJP, but all political players. Even a person like Kejriwal supported them. Congress did not vote against them. They walked out. Walking out doesn't mean voting against the proposed legislation. So this statement, which might have been, as far as I can speculate or I can, have some logical or political deduction of the situation, might have been passed on to Mehbooba by someone within the party whom she trusted. And the result is there for everybody to see.
But do you believe there is an internal crisis in People's Democratic Party? Some leaders were also expressed and expelled. And what will be the future of PDP?
That was before this 3770.
That is what I'm saying.
Somebody-
There are rebels.
One gentleman
Some
was
are expelled. You have a contradictory
One or
view.
two gentlemen were expelled from the party by Mahbooba before this dispute.
That's why I'm saying there seems to be an internal crisis in the sense that you have contradictory views.
You
That
see,
someone was convincing her to make those statements.
There is a damage. Whether it's a crisis or not will depend upon the voters and the workers.
But what will be the future of People's Democratic Party?
I don't know. I don't know what
Are you
will
going
be.
to remain in PDP?
I'm still in PDP.
And you plan on staying in PDP?
I don't know what the future will be. I don't know whether I'll remain in politics. Honestly, I don't know whether I will remain in politics or not. I don't know what will be the future of National Conference. I don't know what will be the future of PDP. It will depend on the people if they are silent. They are not expressing their views at all. There is no political activity on the ground. There are some people who are, here and there busy, taking one direction or the other. But since I have been in politics for a very, very long time, from my student days, I have a different perspective. I think that Sheikh Abdullah became Sheikh Abdullah again because people wanted him to be Sheikh Abdullah again. Otherwise, he was in prison for first 12, 13 years, then again another 8 up to 10 years. It's the people who finally decide. Now, I don't know what the people of Kashmir are thinking. I don't even know what the people of Jammu are thinking. Whether they are Dogras or Gujars or Pahadis, I don't know what they are thinking. I was the first person to venture to talk about this issue. Otherwise, nobody wanted to talk about this issue. After me, some other people have started repeating the same request, Article 371, protection of land rights and job rights, so on and so forth. But I thought that somebody had to speak. But my voice is not the final voice. I am just an individual. It will become a people's voice when the people who have represented them in the past or who are still relevant people. We have some exchange of views across region, across religions, in all communities, and then present our request to the central government after depending upon the judgment of the Supreme Court.
Regarding Ladakh as well, do you think that separation of Ladakh from Jammu and Kashmir is irrevocable, or would you demand a reunification of Ladakh?
You see, I had been initially when I became a minister, 2002, I was also a minister. I had the privilege of being a minister of many portfolios. One of my portfolios was Ladakh affairs. So I had occasion to interact with the elected representatives of Hill Council and the representatives across the society. Ladakh has two distinct kind of identities. One are Buddhists, dominant in Leh. The other are Shias in the other part of, Zanskar and etc. and etc. My impression is, and I'll be candid about it, that Buddhists of Leh would not like to become part of Kashmir again. Maybe Shias may want to become a part of Kashmir, but Buddhists will be reluctant. So I am not at the moment, so advocating that, when you make this upgrade it back into statehood, Jammu and Kashmir, then I am not putting it as a condition that Leh should also become a part of it. No. People of Leh should decide it.
There is a confusion currently regarding what will be the changes that will occur in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Several commissions have been made dysfunctional. So do you think that the scrapping of Article 370 was a well thought out decision? Do you see wisdom in shutting down many commissions which were responsible for bringing accountability and transparency in the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir?
lot of things have happened after this. Some of these steps, I think, were very well thought of before the abrogation of Article 370, 35A. One was that Army, CRP, BSF, which was deployed in Kashmir, I believe had been instructed not to use force and be polite with the people. And after 5th of August, even during the period of my house arrest, some people could come who were not journalists or others, could come and see me, and they used to tell me that the army did not trouble them, CRP did not trouble them. So far as management of security on the ground was concerned, I think it had been well thought of and well executed. However, I don't mean to say that silence of people of Jammu and people of Kashmir means reconciliation. I don't know what's going on in their heart. I hope they think constructively. I hope they think responsibly. But I don't know what they are thinking. So far as the administration is concerned, a lot of people have complained to me about problems and hiccups that have afflicted the development work. I know Chief Secretary in person, intelligent man, the Lieutenant Governor. I have not met so far, but I don't think these problems, that we face at the administration level, whether it's development side, closing of commissions, other things, I don't think it will last long. They will have to take some positive and constructive decision that will, within the parameters of law, that will provide some relief and hope to the people of Kashmir. You have to believe me when I tell you that there are people who don't get a bed in hospital for 3 months. This is our health sector. There are, take education sector. Last time I saw the figures, 30-40% vacancies are not filled up. There is, the education system is suffering. Tourism, so far as Kashmir is concerned, is finished. The trade sector, development sector in Kashmir, I don't know much about Jammu. I have not been able to, roam about various. Jammu is just three regions put together: Chenab Valley, main Jammu, mainland Jammu, and then Pir Panjal Jammu. But we have real day-to-day problems also. And the political decisions should not stand in the way of the economic decisions and development decisions. And I pray that the sooner attention is paid, right from top to bottom, to those real issues, and we get only confused and suffer from all kind of phobias because of the political developments. And if we remain only preoccupied with this, common man and woman will suffer.
You are one of the few Kashmiri politicians who admired Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well as Home Minister Amit Shah. Considering the way dissent is being dealt with in the entire country with Citizenship Amendment Act, NRC, do you still believe the same thing? Do you still admire them, or are you reconsidering?
I publicly had admired Prime Minister Modi. MPs were there and ministers were there and there. My view was that the way he had initiated various schemes in the country, dozens of schemes, they were initiated. The way he reached out to Muslim countries in the world also. whether it is UAE or it is Saudi Arabia or some other countries, and West also, and Europe also, the way he, conducted all those affairs and came up with the new. I said, these were my words, I said, Prime Minister Sahab, if you have the support of your colleagues, you may go down in history and you may be remembered like Mahatma Gandhi. Unfortunately, lately some issues have cropped up, like about, it started with Northeast, with SMEs and non-SMEs, and an issue which was a legal issue, so because there were some agreements between the Assam Students Union and then the Congress government, etc., etc. With passage of time, it became a religious divide, a religious issue. Now you see those old ladies sitting in here and there, you see people with guns going into university campuses, you see the country being divided, on religious lines. It hurts me. I am a small man. My voice may not carry much weight in the rest of the country. But I cannot remain silent on this, that a legal issue, a statistical issue, how many Assamese are there, how many Bengalis came after 1971, who came and this. These are issues of sub-legal, implication. The dispute has become almost like a religious dispute. The only thing, however, for which I'm still feeling hopeful, is that all those Muslims carry Indian flag in their hand. That is the hope. That despite the fact that they have a fear, which may be unfounded or founded, it depends how the law is executed. It depends on the execution of the law. But despite those fears, they say, we'll sit here and we are loyal citizens of India when we believe in Constitution. And I hope that sense prevails. I think the misunderstanding arose when the word Muslim was missing from a certain piece of policy or legislation, that Hindus who are persecuted in Pakistan, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, etc., etc., and Bangladesh and Afghanistan. But then there are some Hindus who may be persecuted in other parts of the world also. No, there is also a law of asylum. There is an international law of asylum. There is already a law on the Indian, statutory books about granting asylums and all that. For example, Muslims will suffer in Myanmar, and they want to come to India. Some words were missing, and that gave a scope for some people to perceive this whole legislation as religiously biased. There are always some people who, either out of ignorance or out of prejudice, maybe sometimes miscommunication, believe that this legislation is directed against Muslims, and the country is getting emotionally divided on religious lines, which is very unhappy. We suffered first because of partition of 1947, because there was division on the basis of religion. Had that partition not taken place, we would have been the largest country in the world and one of the most prosperous and prestigious countries in the world, and we would have been a member of the Security Council. So this religious divide is not good. It's not good for Hindus, it's not good for Muslims, it's not good for Christians, it's good for nobody. But how to manage it? Nobody, cares what a small person like me talks from a small union territory sitting in Jammu. Who will listen to, even if I have to make some suggestions, who will listen to me?
In the end, last question on a lighter note, I would like to ask you, do you see yourself in some distant future whenever elections happen? Do you dream to be the next Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, or do you believe that it will happen once again, that a female from People's Democratic Party will rise, become the face of PD and also become the next CM?
I don't waste my time about thinking who will be the Chief Minister and who will not be the Chief Minister. Men come and go. We had some very famous names, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira Gandhi, we have Mr. Modi. Do you think that these are eternal kind of facts of life? And what is important is the social fabric of a nation. Whether that fabric is intact or is it full of creases and misunderstandings. Those are my issues. I told you a few minutes back, I don't know whether I will remain in politics or not. Suppose my suggestions are rejected both by people and also by Government of India. Why should I, impose myself on people? No, you have to listen to me. Suppose people also reject my proposal. Parliament also rejects, Government of India also rejects. Everybody rejects my opinion. Why should I remain in politics? So I don't waste time on who will be next Chief Minister or what will be my personal future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beg. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
द वायर के और वीडियोस देखने के लिए सब्सक्राइब करें और बेल आइकन पर क्लिक करें। स्वतंत्र पत्रकारिता की आर्थिक मदद करने के लिए डिस्क्रिप्शन में दिए गए लिंक पर जाएं और अपनी राशि चुनें।